I've been watching a lot of Elementary, David, on Netflix. I know you've watched it. What are your thoughts?
Well, the joy of binge watching is that thoughts don't actually come into it. But I can tell you something about my feelings.
Please do.
My feelings are that I have a very good time binge watching Elementary. I really do. And it's one of the few shows I do binge watch because I have short attention spans and I am very critical and I have no time for rubbish.
I think it is much easier to binge watch 40-minute segments, which Elementary is divided into, rather than the much more acclaimed Sherlock, which is the BBC Sherlock, the Benedict Cumberbatch. And I started watching Elementary first. That was my introduction into Sherlockland. And after I watched a few episodes in season 1, and then Netflix took season 1 and season 2 off, so I had to restart again in season 3. But I thought I should have some context, so I watched the first 2 episodes, not realizing there were only 3 episodes in season 1 of Sherlock. And I enjoyed them, but you can't binge watch 2 movie-length episodes in the same way as you binge watch Elementary. So
What was your limit for binge watching Elementary? How many could you see in a row?
3.
Also.
3.
But do go on, I interrupted you.
I loved Cumberbatch. I thought that he has the most extraordinary face, but more about him later. What I want to ask you about is the performance of Johnny Lee Miller in the American Elementary, one set in New York City. What did you think of his performance?
You know, when I look back onto his performance in series 1, episode 1, the pilot, it was like many pilots, very jerky and jumpy, and quite a lot of the energy was being taken up or created by the recalcitrant opposition of the professional detective who was opposed to this Britisher coming along and being a consultant and not behaving the way a proper detective does and just frankly getting up the other guy's nose. That casts a lot of shade. But in time, the character of Sherlock, as imagined by Johnny Lee Miller, that is his name, isn't it?
Johnny Lee Miller.
And the dynamism, the true dynamism, the interactive dialectic between himself and Watson was very, very potent, and I kept waiting for more and more development to come between them. But to answer your question in a sentence, I loved his performance.
I liked his performance as well, and also putting that into a context, albeit not into another Sherlock series. At about the same time as I started watching Elementary, I'd watched all 7 episodes of the self-contained drama Bodyguard, which, as you know, was voted number 2 in the top 10 2018 British TV series. Of course, number 1 was the absolutely splendid Killing Eve. Wasn't that great? But let's get back to Elementary and Johnny Lee Miller. Richard Maddock. Is it Maddock? Richard Maddock in Bodyguard. Most people might know him from Game of Thrones, where he played...
Oh, I must interject. Most people would know him only from Game of Thrones.
Only from Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Rob, doomed by the Red Wedding king. I thought that his performance in Bodyguard, albeit that it won an Emmy for Best Male Actor in a Drama, was really wooden. And if you're talking about a much better performance, I think Johnny Lee Miller is the one. Albeit that, of course, it's many more seasons. But I thought that his performance in Bodyguard was awful, actually.
Absolutely. And you are completely correct to contrast it with Miller, who's never won an award, as far as I know, a television award in his life, despite a much greater corpus of work.
No, he hasn't.
I think the thing that grabs me about Elementary is the capacity to allow character to develop between the two of them, the dyad, the interactive dyad, is so potent. It is so potent. Both of them really become Watson and really become Sherlock. Whereas the Cumberbatch thing, which I also enjoyed, but it's more of a pastiche on 19th century London, brought up to date with silly clothes of the same address. And what one is left with is that the distinction, the positive distinction, is that the New York production, the Brownstone, is something completely new. It's not even the beginning of being a pastiche or a send-up or an anything. It's the show.
Yes, I think that's an excellent way of assessing the differences. I'd like to talk about, now we're talking about character-driven shows. I mean, the plots are inconsequential. The fascination is the interaction between Watson and Sherlock, and that lovely little ensemble, which is comprised of the young detective, what's his name, Marcus, and the captain, who are charming. But the relationship between and the presentation of Sherlock and his father Morland, that dynamic I think is wonderful. I thought Morland has the most astonishing face. The actor playing him is an Australian actor, and it's almost as if he's got a prosthetic face, as if a la Mission Impossible. At some point or other, he's going to reveal himself, and of course, symbolically, he is a creature of many faces, a man of hidden depths, ominous interests, and he's going to pull off the latex face and reveal himself as somebody else. But I think he's wonderful. What are your thoughts on him?
I find him a fascinating character, Morland. He clearly goes to Roger Stone's tailor. He is exquisitely dressed, and his interiors appear to come from his tailor. They're constructed around him. He's a jewel in a setting. The construction, the production construction of Morland is always outstanding. You never see him on a motorbike. You seldom ever see him in a car. You may see him in a shishi restaurant, but mostly it's in his mysterious office, conducting his mysterious business.
Or eating very, very slowly in very small portions. I've just got to the episode where the astonishing Lucy Liu has sussed out why he eats so slowly and in such small portions. Of course, she's a doctor, so she would know. The scene that I particularly love between Morland and Sherlock, an unexpected scene where the father and son, who are estranged for much of the time, come together in a kind of tag team. And you may remember the episode, it's in season 4 near the beginning, where there is some mysterious something going on in Puerto Rico. Somebody wants to build something, somebody wants to pull something down. It really doesn't matter.
You've summed it up exquisitely.
Yes. And the two meet. The father and son are at some diplomatic reception. There are many such receptions, very powerful people, often Russians, Chinese, a whole lot of stereotypes, and a very glamorous older woman, beautifully coiffed and groomed, comes up to Morland and she says, "Oh, Morland, I haven't seen you for such a long time." And Sherlock, standing in the wings, is looking at how she's smiling, and he comments enigmatically to his father afterwards, "She's telling a lie." Of course, Sherlock is a lie detector, a walking lie detector. I know she was telling a lie because the wrinkles around her eyes were doing one thing rather than another. You know how Sherlock works. And then later, having sussed out what this woman was up to, she was trying to con them into doing something or not doing something. They met her on a terrace, on a rooftop, and presumably Sherlock's dad had booked out the whole rooftop. There was nobody else there, but the two were on lounges, and they had shades on. It was truly marvellous and most unexpected. And she came up, and either she was possibly a little anxious to be confronted by Sunglass 1 and Sunglass 2, but her beautiful voice was a little bit anxious, and she spoke a little bit differently. Of course, that was a cue to Sherlock, that she was even then telling stories about Puerto Rican monkeys. And it all turned out, of course, that the father and son had got her in one. It was a wonderful, it was kind of magical in the way in which they suss things out. I think that's quite an interesting element, the kind of magical aspect of Sherlock and his father. What do you think of that?
I think he is an extremely potent element in the dynamic. And what makes him a potent element is that Sherlock hates him.
Yes.
And hates him historically, has always hated him, and if for some reason won't forgive him, yet continues to be a kind of client. When the chips are down and the monkeys are about to become extinct and Puerto Rico is about to float off into the Atlantic or the Pacific or wherever it is, when there's real shit, Mordaunt comes in and Sherlock knows everything, can do everything, puts up with his dad and takes his lead. But he hates him, and the hate is a force for energy in this context. It's a dynamism. It's not a pathology. And to talk about Sherlock in terms of pathology or mental health or any other such things is to talk about nothing, because Sherlock is a magical creature. Well, one can play psychologist and say, but he's on the spectrum, he's possibly autistic, he's got these savant capabilities, he is single-minded to a point that indicates he's a bit round the bend. But the fact of the matter is that he is a magical creature. He's a magical creature purely in terms of the heightened capacities he presents to the camera and to us, and which we accept as real.
Well, there's something very similar, and I suspect it's common to the franchise, the Sherlock franchise. There's something similar, and I can only speak of the first 2 episodes of season 1 in the Cumberbatch universe, but I think you can surmise a great deal from that. And I just remind you of a key conversation between the Watson, which is wonderfully played by Martin Freeman. Who can forget Martin Freeman in The Office? In a way, it's him playing the Office character, but not in Slough, this time in a Chinese restaurant, nibbling on noodles, and he's got to eat quickly because he never seems to have time to eat when he's with Sherlock. And Sherlock is sitting, the Cumberbatch Sherlock, with that ridiculous scarf around his neck, very, very a dangerous thing to wear around his neck, as we see. And he's looking out the window, and Watson says to him, there are no arch enemies in real life. Obviously, a conversation they've been having, that the high romantic notion of arch enemies. There are no arch enemies, really, in real life. And Sherlock says, sorry? And Watson says, no, there are no such things. Sherlock says, how very dull. What do you have? And poor old Watson has to make do with friends and people you like and people you meet and boyfriends and girlfriends. And there's absolute silence from Sherlock, and Watson plows on. And finally the camera shifts a bit close up on Sherlock, and he says, dull. And I think there's something of that in all the Sherlock series we've watched. It is not real. And therein lies the entertainment for the viewer. Never supposed to be real. So the plots can be completely inconsequential.
Well, unreal in the sense of magical, to go back to that point. And when you think about where Conan Doyle, what's his name? Conan Doyle came from. I mean, that was a chap who hung out in seances.
Yes.
Who really believed he saw ectoplasm. Who knew that his guide was a Red Indian called Wabba Wabba. I mean, or Minnehaha. Or Hiawatha, or any of those names. Or Pocahontas. With that kind of energy behind it, how can you not produce magical characters?
Well, a very short step, a small step to the tortoise. Please, would you tell me what you think of Clyde? Remember that wonderful opening of an episode in Johnny Lee Miller's Sherlock, where he is making some snacks, some vitamin snacks. He's cooking for Clyde. What status does Clyde the tortoise have in the Brownstone universe?
Clyde is a marvellously chosen animal. In Brooklyn, you don't have tortoises. You don't have anything that hibernates.
In the fridge.
Or anywhere. Anywhere. There's no hibernating animals. You don't keep reptiles. You don't have pythons. You're not a snake collector. You have man's best friend in various guises and breeds. You have teacup versions or Great Danes, and you have pussycats in all their multitude. You have them declawed, and you have them muted, perhaps. They're subjected to all sorts of ghastly veterinary cosmic surgery, but you don't have a Chelonian. You just don't. Yet here we are in a show, in a brownstone, and the absolute perfection of Clyde. The way he fits in with all the other strange objects, the museum-type objects that constitute the study. But apart from that, it also links to magic. Because tortoises, nobody ever knows the age of a tortoise. You know that tortoises might be 200 years old or 6 months, but
they all look the same.
They all look the same. But
poor tortoise.
But what is fascinating too is that they have a role in divination. And in the brownstones in hipsterland, I should imagine divination still has some sort of an audience. And where tortoises come into divination is that it's the third way of consulting the I Ching. And you consult the I Ching in such a way that you engage in certain behaviors that throw up a hexagram, which is the key to the chapter you're going to read, because at that moment your thoughts and the universe clang together like two massive symbols and produce the universal truth of page 12.
So much rests on Clyde.
Well, he has that capacity, but the point about Clyde is that you know that hanging over his head, if you subscribe to this view of his destiny, that over his head he's going to die. Because the way you consult the I Ching with a tortoise is to put it upside down into a fire.
Oh.
And as it dies, and as the heat melts and conflates the plates in the shell, the plastron, which is the low sheet of tortoise exoskeleton, ruptures open, and the hexagram is revealed. It reveals a hexagram. There you can see the hexagram, which is a series of broken, unbroken lines. You take that, and it tells you that the girl you met on the bus really loves you, and you should take her out a second time. But on the other hand, Clyde is gone.
To his Bonnie. Perhaps that's where we should end.